Hey everybody, welcome to the 20-Minute Bible Study. I'm Vince Miller, and today we're discussing the topic of conflict at home. You know, in families and marriage, conflict is inevitable. I know it's shocking, but it's going to happen, and in some seasons it will feel like conflict is the only thing that you ever manage. This includes struggles over finances, disputes over parenting approaches, or even a challenge that you're facing because of your own sin. Since conflict is unavoidable, those who anticipate, lead, and successfully manage these moments have a distinct advantage. So here are 5 laws to managing conflict in your home. Law number 1 is this: manage your own anxiety. You know, conflict is not always a bad thing, but you're going to quickly become irritated by it, I promise you. This is part of the reason for all the stress that you experience in your family. But you need to keep in mind conflict is just normal. Don't let yourself get baited and emotionally hooked by it. Take a deep breath because it's hard to help others when you are anxious too. Law number 2 is this: listen and clarify. You know, when emotions rise, family members tend to stop listening to each other. Imagine that, probably because their hearing is being hijacked by how they feel, their emotions, and even their need to be heard. When you listen, you're giving people a hearing that they so desperately want or don't have. And listening gives you a better understanding of what's really going on, which inadvertently, by the way, gives others the time to ramp down emotionally. Law number 3 is this: identify desired outcomes. You know, as you listen, you should be on a quest for identifying desired outcomes. Often when we're in conflict, we don't realize that the other party may have similar or even common goals. Usually we're just debating the best way to arrive at a solution together. If you know the desired results, you can help them figure out the best way to get there and get there together. Law number 4 is this: state next steps if there are any. Whatever your next step is, identify it and ensure the family members that we're all clear on what they need to do and when they need to do it. These steps are evidence that you have listened. And then finally, law 5, include outside counsel as needed. You know, sometimes you'll have issues that hit an impasse which require outside counsel. This is usually where a neutral party respected by both people should be included. For example, a licensed marriage and family counselor is a great person to turn to. Remember, there's nothing wrong with seeking help when 2 parties are too emotionally entangled. This is often a better choice than just bearing the issues or attempting to handle it on your own. So when we return, we will be joined by a special guest today and a good friend who will help us to dig into this topic a little bit more.
Get your day started right. Sign up for the Men's Daily Devotional at mensdevo.org. That's mensdevo.org. They're short, sweet, and to the point. Read them and share them with the men you know. And get into God's Word daily.
Well, guys, welcome back to the show. So glad to have you here again. Today I'm joined by Paul Tommerdahl. Thanks for being with us, man.
Yeah, it's great to be here.
Yeah, it's awesome. Good friend. And so today we're looking at conflict in the home. You never have any of that, do you?
None at all.
You know what? I think conflict in the home is it's tricky sometimes because it's one of those environments where I don't think you feel super competent in your leadership sometimes, and other people make you feel that way, don't they?
Yeah, of course.
So let me ask you this to begin, because I think most guys would really love to hear like a real response to this, because in conflict, we all have kind of our weaknesses or our challenges. What kinds of conflict do you not prefer?
Good question. I think conflict that is sometimes undefined or not getting to the root of the issue can be very challenging. So I think trying to, whether it's with your spouse or your kids, let's figure out what's actually underneath this and address that. in a healthy way.
Okay, so I can find myself, even as you're talking about that, feeling some anxiety about that, because I think I have some of those tendencies too, like when you're having a discussion or an argument and you know that you're kind of, maybe you're touching on peripheral issues, but not really getting after the issue, maybe because somebody's not being transparent or real with you about it. You then find like, man, how long is it going to take to get to the point?
Yeah, and I think sometimes you have to pursue that a little further. The initial response might be it's nothing, or I'm fine. And it might take a couple of attempts to dig deeper with it. I think that can
is that a patience thing for us as guys? Do you think? Okay. So it could be some, I would assume it is for me too, but it's also all this discussion around all these peripheral non-issues, right, that are distracting from really getting after the real issue. Okay, let me ask you this then. When it comes to conflict with people, are there certain personality types that just irritate you that make it almost nearly impossible to resolve a conflict?
Yeah. I think people that get too emotionally charged, that can be very difficult. When I have someone who gets loud or yells, and luckily I've been blessed with a marriage that neither of us yell, which has been beneficial in our style of how to engage in conflict and address that. But I think that's something that I get a little intimidated, or maybe not intimidated, but stressed. And then the anxiety level starts to creep up in me, and I can't clearly deal with that conflict.
Okay, so you guys, you don't yell at each other, really? So what does it look like when you guys get angry with each other?
Intense, right?
Yeah, I'm sure you get intense, but what does it look like when that escalates then?
It'll still escalate. I've had times where I've had to just step away for a minute and take a breather. And I know that's not always the best mechanism, but it beats yelling at each other, I guess.
Yeah.
And we still need to sit down and deal with those issues face to face, and spend some time kind of, again, getting to what the root of it is, trying to figure out if there's other underlying things that are happening, and maybe even asking for help from other people for advice that might have gone through that before, because believe it or not, other people have conflict.
Okay, so here we're on the opposite end of your spectrum.
You're
so
just gonna let it rock.
We actually, there's a lot of yelling in our home, and we're all. It's weird, if you ever set us down at a dinner table, we're like all vying for position with each other. You'd be like, what in the living world is going on with this family? They're all trying to get a word in. They're all trying to talk. Yeah. They're all trying to argue with each other, and it's quite entertaining from my standpoint sometimes. But it's weird, like, even though like some of the people in my family do like to yell and argue or have an argumentative style of resolving conflict, I don't always like that either. Sometimes I run from it, and sometimes I tend to like run away from it or avoid it. But that's true for us. And I'm sure every family out there probably has a different way that they handle these moments, right? But let's dig into this a little bit. So why do you think it is that we forget to handle conflict in a peaceful way? Why do you think that is?
I think it's our human nature to to me, I get defensive, and then I want to attack.
Okay.
Instead of taking the time to listen, figure out what the issues are, and maybe process that through in a rational way, set up a plan of how we're going to get through this. My human tendency is to just try to break through, push through, get to the, I'm gonna win this argument. Okay, it's my sinful nature coming through.
Yeah, right? Sure. So you have this moment. Can I put it in my own words? Would that be okay? So you have this moment where you kind of self-preserve, it sounds like a little bit, where you feel maybe attacked, you get defensive, maybe because it's true, maybe because you're trying to protect yourself, maybe because you're having a hard time dealing with those own deeper issues too, right? And you're trying to keep things on the peripheral, push back on it, maybe.
And it's hard to admit you're wrong. I don't know if you have that issue.
I do not. I'm wrong all the time. Yeah.
It's just not something that I don't think we're wired to want to do. It's that self-preservation that you've mentioned.
Yeah. And so that's interesting. I think that I have these moments too, where in conflict I don't prefer to handle it in a healthy way, mostly because everything's being hijacked by me emotionally, right? It's weird. There's not like a sign that you get with a big billboard that says, "Oh, you're about to enter conflict," right? Like here it comes, right? Yeah, it usually comes suddenly. Right. It hits you like a Mack truck, and you don't know that you're in it until you're in it. And then when you get in it, you realize about 5 minutes into, you've handled it very poorly. Usually because you missed every sign. Yeah, you missed every sign. I need a redo, and every indication along the way, you get hijacked. And I think that's part of the reason that we don't handle conflict well. That's probably part of my confession. And you heard the monologue today, right? You know that I've got these 5 laws, I call them. I think they're pretty standard laws of any conflict. But of those 5 laws, which one stood out to you?
Yeah, I think there's a couple different ways I took that. So on the perspective of my family as a whole, I think the anxiety one stood out to me because it kind of comes through in how I lead the family and my level of anxiety flowing through to the children and to my wife. So having to step and say, I need to think about this rationally, pray about it, and kind of come in with a calmer demeanor. Yeah. It flows through our whole family. Yeah. We model to our kids, you as well, I'm sure, different styles and conflict resolution styles. And I have to think about that, coming in with a little bit less anxiety. I think with my wife, it's more of a listening thing because it goes back to that defensive nature. I immediately want to chime in with all of those incorrect statements of why I'm right, you're wrong. And it normally isn't the case. Obviously, I'm maybe going a little too far with that. But it's something that I need to step back and listen, gain perspective, calm down. It helps both of us calm down to listen and not interrupt.
Yeah, that's really good. I would agree with you. I think that every family situation has different challenges with laws like this, right? Like where we see a weakness maybe in our ability to emotionally kind of calm down, right? Which you're talking about anxiety there, or if it's an ability to listen and clarify what's going on and have kind of an objective, non-personalized view of an attack, right? It's really hard to remember all that stuff when you're in the middle of an argument, but it's part of the challenge of when you get hit by this Mack truck called conflict, that we're to lead through it, not allow it to lead us.
Yeah, and you're not going to get it right every time. It's a matter of learning and becoming more a student of your spouse, your kids, and how they do conflict, and finding ways that works for your family to be able to press through these things.
That's a good comment. They will happen. That's a good comment. I don't know if the guys were listening to what you said there, but I think it's really an astute comment that we have to be a student of our family and of moments. And I think that's where we have this opportunity not only to be a student, but to steward the leadership we've been given. I want to come back to that, but let me dive into these words from Proverbs 10:12. So the verse that we're looking at this week is from Proverbs, and it reads this way: hatred stirs up conflict, but love covers all offenses. Now, I think that's such a sweet verse, right? I mean, if there was something that stood out to you from this verse here, what would it be? Hatred stirs up conflict, but love covers all offenses.
That's a great question. I think with that, we have the love of our family, of our spouse and kids. And you need to remember that you're put together for a reason, to love one another, to be Jesus to one another. And we have those opportunities to forgive each other. Whether that conflict is a hard one or not, you will step past that eventually, and love will help you get through that. And if you can't get past that hatred that can develop in your family, if you don't address those issues, that can really eat at you. So making sure that you cover those issues and then get through it and show love to one another. It's so important.
Yeah, it's weird how I think when sometimes you're in a conflict where very quickly the people that you love can turn from friend to foe, isn't it? It's just like it's like a split second. It's like, and the weird part is that I know that you love your family and I love my family, but in moments of conflict, they are the enemy. I mean, seriously, they turn from friend to foe. It's nuts. And as soon as they do, there's almost hatred that emits is admitted toward them and
very
against
true.
them,
Yeah.
right? But that kind of that fulcrum or tipping point of this whole conflict resolution process is to perceive them not as a foe, as a friend, and as part of the same family unit, by the way, as one family unit trying to accomplish something together against external forces, not internal forces.
That's
working,
a great point.
right? And so I think that proverb gets at that a little bit. It gets at the fact that, look, these conflicts aren't against each other. They're against an enemy that's seeking to divide us.
Yeah, that's good.
And, love sees beyond that. It's the ability to see beyond the fact that my wife is not my enemy. My kid is not my enemy. My spouse is not my enemy right now. The enemy is my enemy.
Yeah.
And untruth is my enemy. And while there's this person that's done something, some sort of action or behavior that's led to us seeing this conflict with different perspective, we need to still see them as God's gracious creature, right?
That's
and
great.
I think that this proverb really digs after some of that and really challenges us around some of it. So as we close, Paul, I'm trying to think. I want to come back to this student comment because I think it's such a practical application for the guys to really embrace this week. But my thought is, coming out of your statement, that it might be a good actionable for us this week to really just become a student of our family and how we handle conflict.
Yeah.
How would you do that this week if you were to become a student of your spouse and of your family? What would you do?
Right. I think with especially my kids, talking to my spouse, how do my kids handle conflict? And how can we better model that for them? And making sure that they can see that we can handle even conflict within our family. And then finding out what makes them tick or what sets them off and trying to maybe avoid some of those things and find ways that they better handle those things and maybe use those techniques. You're going to fail. It's going to have issues as you go through these things, but keep trying. That's all you can do at this point.
So I want to end with that, especially with the challenge for the guys. So guys, I want you to hear what Paul was talking about here because I think he seeded a fantastic thought. It might be a good idea for you this week to not let conflict lead you, but for you to lead a conflict by you becoming a student, right, or a steward of your family system by leading it toward more healthy patterns. And so I would encourage you this week, just kind of notice how your family members handle conflict and dig into it. Understand how your wife handles it. Signs, indications, road markings on how she's going to handle a conflict as a bruise, and notice those signs and indicators, and then try to lead through that this week rather than having conflict lead us, because that's when we get undermined in our home. So guys, thanks so much for being with us again this week in this episode. Remember, do life and go all in, and we'll see you back here next time.